Death Stranding is for me the best example of immersion in video games to date. Specifically how Hideo Kojima poses the question to every gameplay schema. How do we make you make sense? My previous video, which used the Stanley Parable as a case study on context in video games, focused almost entirely on the narrator Kevin Brighting. But with Death Stranding, we have a lot more to unpack in that respect. This is almost entirely because of the gameplay of Death Stranding, which the internet has either labelled revolutionary or boring, or in some cases, both. Before we get into some examples, let's just talk about context in video games for a moment. Context is, for a lot of games, especially story-based adventures like Death Stranding, the main driving force of every player action. The player doesn't perform these individual actions because they achieve something with each punch or step or whatever, but because it leads to progress towards resolving the story of either the whole game or that particular mission. Context is also what immerses the player in the world. Now, I'm not talking about the lore of any given game world, though that does fall under the context umbrella and shouldn't be dismissed outright, but more so the underpinning logic of what makes what you are doing as a player make sense. Whilst developing the context story and, most interestingly, gameplay for the game, Kojima used what is called the M.I.C.E mix. This is used to great effect by only the best of the best in storytelling. The original Star Wars trilogy as well as the Hobbit novel do this perfectly, though the Hobbit might be a bit difficult to chew through by today's standards. Anyway, what is the M.I.C.E technique? Well, M.I.C.E stands for milieu, idea, character, and event. All of these are types of stories, which can work separately, but when they come together, that's when you get a magic mix of design brilliance. Death Stranding uses all of these aspects and mixes them together to become the finished product that it is. Milieu is used to describe a story when the main character is thrust into the world of the unknown. This is akin to stories like Alice in Wonderland or The Wizard of Oz, where the core hurdle that the protagonist has to overcome is that everything is new and often scary because it is unknown. Kind of like how most people are wary of darkness. In Death Stranding, the milieu is not just you as the player being brought into the world via the 2-hour movie of pure exposition at the start of the game, but through the gameplay as well. You have to explore the unknown in Death Stranding almost constantly. Sure, the game loves making you backtrack to show what you have accomplished along the way, but initially, during the start of a new questline, you must venture into the unknown with no idea what might happen. This is a very powerful way to tell a unique and personal story, but not by itself. Let's move on to the idea. The idea style of story is most relevant to cop shows or detective dramas, like Sherlock. The main driving force of the story is finding out information that you do not already know, but wish to find out. This is incredibly prominent in Death Stranding, but more so in the latter half of the game and really kicks in from Hartman's episode onwards. This allows players to become invested even further into the world, using the milieu to set up the mystery and give proper exposition. You allow the player to invest themselves in unraveling the mystery and therefore driving them towards progression throughout the game, and overcome some of the gameplay hurdles in their way, such as the BTs and mules, just through context alone. Next, we have character. Anyone who has played through Death Stranding will probably know that the character aspect of the M.I.C.E mix happens arguably quite late on in the story. I say arguably, but I guarantee you will notice the character part of the story a lot more the second time around, as it is incredibly subtle in the first half of the game. Whether that's a good thing or not, that is not for me to say in this video. Anyway, character is relatively straightforward. The protagonist starts off feeling and acting one way towards the main goal and or antagonist element of the game, and then by the end of it, they have changed how they feel towards that. Along the way, there will be events and blockades that affect growth and the development of the character, making it so it's less of a linear growth and more of a roller coaster. But the core aspect of a given character story is that the character isn't the same person that they started out as. For Death Stranding, if we just focus on the main antagonist Sam Porter Bridges, this is his feelings towards America and just other people in general. Speaking of events, that's the final part of the mix. Events are densely listed throughout all of Death Stranding, either through backstories or gameplay, but events are very prominent in every corner of the game. A couple of examples I'll just rattle off now are Hartman's family passing away, causing him to take on a new life of dying every 20 minutes in search for them. This is a clever one because it relates both to the antagonist of the game as well as a useful tool to aid the protagonist. Also, Mama and Lotney's baby passing away helps Sam connect more to his BB as well as to Lotney. Not to mention Mama's and Lotney's own connection growing even stronger. But yeah, events used to trigger character and gameplay changes are probably the most prominent aspects of the M.I.C.E mix in Death Stranding, but would not work nearly as well if it was alone in the story. So that's how the context is structured in Death Stranding. But it's not just the context that makes the game so immersive. The gameplay is a huge part of it as well. For the rest of the video, I'm going to talk about more examples of how Kojima strives for immersion in every inch of the design of Death Stranding. Not to critique or to analyze it, but more so to inspire the designers that watch this video. So by the time I finished the game, I clocked in just over 34 hours, which means that according to How Long to Beat, I played just a smidge quicker than the average player at the time of recording this video, which means I didn't experience everything that the game has to offer. That would apparently involve an investment of 134 hours on average. But yeah, with that out of the way, let's go. So, Hideo Kojima wanted to really focus on connecting players. It's a huge aspect of the game with the use of strands, even going as far to say as, in making Death Stranding, he has created a new type of genre called a Strand game. Whether you are arguing that statement or not, you cannot ignore the strides that he went to cram as much context and immersive cues into every nook and cranny of the game in order to achieve the Strand game title. For example, as you walk along, you may notice that parts of the land look more well trodden than others, which is actually in response to the most popular paths that other players have taken. But not only that, sometimes you can even see the footprints of these players, which are specifically special for connecting players because of the boot wearing mechanic that is so prominent in the game that is actually part of your sparse HUD. Seeing those footprints may even remind a player of the struggles that other players may have gone through if they have forgotten to take a spare pair of boots with them along for a long hike. Such a nice, subtle addition to connect players' experiences together. Now, more on the nose aspect of Death Stranding are the structures that you can build for other players, and the structures that other players have built for you to use. This was the main selling point of the game for me, and it baffles me that I only heard about this a few days before launch. But anyway, it's not enough for you to just use these structures randomly, maybe helping you save a bit of time here and there. No. What makes it so incredible is how intensely difficult it is to traverse the landscapes of Death Stranding. And not only that, but the level design and game design is incredibly purposeful in making you really appreciate these structures. As it's not just that the landscapes are so difficult to navigate, but that you always have to travel through each area initially by yourself without aid. Thus, once you have connected to what is called the chiral network in the game, and other players' structures have become available to use, only then can you use them and make your way back through the same area way faster. And by way faster, I mean sometimes even hours faster depending on your distance. But it doesn't stop there. It wasn't enough for Kojima. He also added a what I have called a nice little touch in my notes to the structures. When you use the middle mouse button on the PS4 controller, you can actually call out to people. And if you are near a structure that someone else has built, you should be able to hear a voice on the other side. Again, this is just another example of that extra step further to connect people in more ways than just gameplay. Now, one of the most subtle yet best ways Kojima uses context to achieve his goal of connecting people is through stamina. Stamina? One of the most used and bland aspects of every game. Kojima has added to it to make it actually mean something. Already, because of the landscape and core gameplay loop of the game, stamina is important. If you neglect Sam for long enough and do not rest or drink or take a breather, his stamina cap will deplete further and further, and in some cases, he will just fall over, which could be the end of your mission. And on top of that, some missions could take you an hour, and if you forget to save, well, I won't tell you how to feel about that. Now you are probably thinking, how does this actually relate to Kojima's goal? To me, it just sounds like a pain in the B to the hind. Well, you aren't wrong. But if you have been doing your duty to your fellow players and have been placing useful structures all across the landscape, you might start getting likes on them. Likes are something which you can give to any structure that isn't yours if you appreciate what other players have done to help you out on your journey. But say you have started getting these likes, you may also notice a little thumbs up that appears on your stamina bar. Likes that other players give you actually aid in stamina regeneration, meaning other players are actually helping you along your journey and pushing you further. I cannot overstate how cool I think this is, and it completely changed my outlook on giving structures and therefore players my likes. Sadly, I didn't even notice this until near the end of the game, on my third to last mission in fact. That may be due to the questionable UI, but that could be a topic for another video. Now, if we move away from the message that Kojima wanted to portray and we just look at the other cool immersion tactics that was implemented into the game, I'm sure you will find something that you either didn't notice or underappreciated at the time. Firstly, let's start with the obvious one. As the story element of the context really leans heavily on the connection between Sam and BB in the later half of the game, taking advantage of the DualShock's motion control and having you have to physically rock your BB back to sleep was such a genius bit of design, which I'm saddened won't be experienced by every player on the PC next year. Also, if you go into third person, you will see that your BT beacon has turned into a mobile for your BB. When talking to holograms, it would have been very, very easy to just stick the base idle animation onto Sam's rig, but instead they either manually or more likely made it so that Sam tracks the head movement of all the holograms in the game and follows them if they move. I only bring up the manual option because in some interactions Sam will react to what they say or do in a way which means he doesn't look at their head or even ignores the person entirely to portray a certain emotion. But either way, it was a nice little touch. One of the more annoying ones is the fact that you can't pause whilst asleep, or while Sam's hands are otherwise preoccupied. An example of this is when he leans on his knees when he is exhausted. However, this does a good job at connecting the player to Sam more. As this may inconvenience you, it is also almost always tied to Sam's current condition, which may inform the player to let him rest or just take better care of his overall condition. This also works well for the internal logic of the game because the menu system is located on Sam's cufflinks, which are located on his wrist. So when you press the options button, Sam physically pulls his wrist up to the camera. Moving on to another example. When you drink in the game, the DualShock vibrates to imitate the vibration of the can when liquid is being poured out of it. It doesn't do a massive amount for immersion, but that is just another example of the subtlety that goes into painting the grander picture that is Death Stranding. So yeah, those are just some examples of the tiny cogs that went into the immersion and context of Death Stranding. Tackling the story part of the machine would be a whole other video if I was to do it. I really wanted to make this video, not really to make a point or produce a hot take to get me views, but instead to inspire any devs that watch my videos to go that extra mile to implement the subtlest or simplest contextual aspects into your game just to pull your player even that one bit deeper into the fold of immersion. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I will make at least one more video on Death Stranding in the future. It will most likely be on the world design, or what I would rather say, level design of this open world. But yeah, if you didn't know already, I am a game designer by trade and I run my own studio called Crab Studios. We recently just went to Glasgow Games Festival to show off our new game that's hitting Kickstarter next year, so if you want to see some content from that trip, then head to our Instagram in the description. I will also be making videos on conventions and how to prepare for them in the future, so if you are interested in that or just the video essays on game design that I make, then please make sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell. So yeah, thanks and goodbye.